Okay, so we are going to speak together today about forms of money used in Japanese internment camps during World War II, and we're going to both talk about some of the things we have seen and some of the things that we know exist somewhere. So there's a little bit of a treasure hunt aspect of this. So there were Japanese internment camps of different sorts, and we'll get into the types of camps shortly, but there were people who were placed across the country, sometimes based on where they were from, and sometimes based on trying to get them far away from where they were from. So this is just a preview map that shows not just that there were places all across the country, but that there were different types. So you can see at the bottom here, there were assembly centers, relocation centers, isolation centers, temporary camps, and then some that were run by the Justice Department. We're just going to talk about a few types and specific places. So this story begins on December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. This is a picture of a scrapbook, and of course that created our entrance into World War II. And although Japanese people and Japanese American people already faced some level of racism in the United States, it of course sparked a huge reaction. People weren't sure if they could trust their neighbors. There was fear, and from that, only 2 months later, in February 1942, came Executive Order 9066, which allowed the exclusion without trial or hearing of people, and in this case, although it wasn't specified in the order, it was intended mainly for people from enemy states, so Japanese, German, Italian people. So here's a photo from the time. You can see this is a fruit and vegetable grocery owned by a Japanese person who's put up a big sign on the outside, "I am an American." So then, starting in March, General DeWitt started evicting people of Japanese ancestry from the West Coast. The West Coast seemed like the most worrisome place because of its proximity to Hawaii, to sort of easy access across the ocean to Japan and to the seaport. So people started to be evicted, and everybody, as you can see in this happens to be one from May of 1942, but all persons of Japanese ancestry living in the particular area, in this case in California, were asked to show up, to register, and to move out. And you can see the type, I realize, is very small, but that a responsible member of each family, preferably the head, was supposed to go, and that evacuees could carry with them bedding and linens, no mattresses, toilet articles, extra clothing, knives, forks, spoons, plates, bowls, and cups, and essential personal effects. So people were asked to give up their most of their households. And during this time, there were over 120,000 Japanese Americans who were evacuated to the places we'll talk about. 70% of them were U.S. citizens, and they were estimated to have lost $4 to $5 billion in property and business. They had to travel by car, by bus, by train, oftentimes traveling far and in very uncomfortable ways. So here is another photo from the time. You can see this is the Nisei Grill. And it says that this restaurant, under new management, will open soon. So that was a place that had to be closed. So the first group that I'm going to talk about are the WCCA assembly centers. These were kind of the initial slightly improvised, let's make something happen quickly places. They were run by the Wartime Civil Control Administration, and they were, there's a little bit of debate about which places counted as WCCA sites as opposed to others, but this is from a report from the 80s that was written up, excuse me, as part of the argument for war reparations. So you can see the main sort of 16 assembly centers, mostly in California and Washington or Oregon. You can see the numbers of people at maximum that were in each place, and the dates that people lived there. Manzanar here at the bottom has the little one because it ended up being it transitioned from being one type of site to another. And they were, purposefully calling them something other than a camp because of the connection to the German camps. But the feeling, it's hard to ignore the similarities in terms of people being taken from their homes without a choice, having to go and register, having to lose most of their belongings, have their entire lives disrupted based on an ethnic group that they were part of. Now, obviously, these camps, they were not death camps. They did not have the same kind of work expectations as concentration camps in the Germany occupied Europe, but the similarities still do exist. So here's a quote that's from that report that I mentioned that helped with the reparation question. Henry went to the control station to register the family. He came home with 20 tags, all numbered 10710, tags to be attached to each piece of baggage and one to hang from our coat lapels. From then on, we were known as family number 10710. So here are some examples of tags. And here's a picture of a family. They've got their bags tagged and their coats tagged, and they are about to head out. Here are people arriving by train. You can see the military presence. And these train rides, this one actually doesn't look as bad, but some description of the windows on the trains being blacked out because they didn't want people to throw rocks or things like that if they realized who was on the train, but it made for a very uncomfortable and hot journey. So as an example here, this is the Manzanar War Relocation Center that I mentioned that was a transitional space. You can see from this photo, in the background are the mountains. You can see a lot of space, and you cannot see anything in terms of a city nearby. So these were people being moved to very remote areas, sometimes to things like racetracks or fairgrounds, places with a lot of open space. And this is people in line to get their housing assignments. These are typical buildings with sort of a tar paper on the side, identical barracks going down. And this is, I realize, a long quote, but the reason I included it is because this talks a bit about the jobs that were held. So originally, they wanted the evacuees to be part, or throughout, they wanted them to be part of running the assembly centers. So there was it says standard round of jobs from doctor to janitor, and they also assisted in the administration. More than 30% of evacuees worked in center administration. And then it does say specifically that the appropriate payment for these services was a matter of some difficulty. At first, there was no pay. Eventually, evacuees were nominally compensated for work actually done. And then eventually, they established a wage schedule. Now, part of the reason for that was that there were some rumors going around that the internees were being paid more than the military. And so they made a point of saying, first of all, this is what we're paying people. And second of all, it is not as much as the lowest paid people in the military, who I think were making $19 a month. In theory, the subsistence, shelter, hospitalization, medical and dental care were supposed to be provided separate without having to be paid for, although it sounds like that was not consistent. And people were were dissatisfied for a lot of reasons, which I'll get into in a moment. This is a lot of information from a report written in 1942 about what was happening. There was the goal of having things be consistent, but you'll see that that didn't always happen. So here are the rates again, explaining different types of jobs that make the different kinds of money, that no one was required to work, but if they did, they were expected to show up, basically. Although, hang on a second, buddy, it's not yet, it's at 4, bud, I love you. Sorry, working from home. So the hang on a second again, buddy, I'm giving a talk right now. I can't. Okay, yeah, Prodigy sounds good, buddy. Sorry. So here are some of the community services that were provided. They were not able to use cash for these services. It says any evacuee who so desired was allowed to purchase extra coupon books. These coupons were acceptable at canteens as well. And everyone was expected to keep track of things, a family ledger. They were given some separate money for clothing, different amounts depending on the environment they were living in, because some people ended out not well packed for environments that got very cold, for example. But they were given coupon books and they were supposed to use these to buy the things they might need. So there was a coupon allowance depending on age here. So under 16, you got $1 a month. If you were over 16, $2.50, married couples, $4.50, and then a maximum of $7.50 for a family. And here's a picture of evacuees getting their coupon books at an assembly center. I don't know how easy it is to read, but it does note, and these you'll see look very similar to the coupon books that were used for the POW camps. So it says, coupons which have been detached from coupon books shall not be accepted and shall be considered of no value. And notice, no sales shall be made from canteens except with coupons. And here are people in the finance division at Santa Anita, which is one of the assembly centers. And then this is one of the center stores. It says that they sold cookies, cakes, pies and fruit, tobacco, drugs, and sundries. So these were to sort of supplement what was provided in the mess hall. And this is just maybe because I'm a parent that there was a specific petition to get more candy in the canteens. And here, in fact, is an assortment of candy at the Portland, Oregon Assembly Center. And there you can see, and in fact, there are diary entries and all kinds of things, but the canteens were a central place for life, and for probably a lot of reasons, including it was one of the few places you could choose things. All of the assembly centers also had newspapers, including their own newspaper and then access to newspapers from outside the community. Their newspapers had some level of control from the administration in terms of what kinds of things they could write about, although they have a lot of interesting things about camp life, about frustrations, and many references to the money. For example, this from Portland says, coupon book setup revised. So this is in June 1942. And they're talking about all the confusion and delay which prevails when they're giving out the coupon books, and they're going to now give them out by number, by mess table, so based on where you sit in the cafeteria, so that you don't have to have this long line. You kind of know when it's going to be your turn. And then same place, a little bit later, in July 24th, coupon books to be issued and another new setup to be used. And they were talking about the specific times. They're going to use the PA system now, and to let people know it's going to be alphabetical order. So they're trying to figure out the best way to do this. You can also see the issuance of clothing underway, another heading talking about how they're going to make sure that everyone gets the clothing issue that they're entitled to. So this is from Santa Anita in California. Amache announces free coupon books distribution will begin Monday from the center cashier's station. Here we are in Stockton. Centerites. So from May 4, so they could also purchase additional coupon books. And here it says from May 14th to June 23rd, the center cashier has sold 6,079 coupon books, totaling $15,197.50. This is from the same free coupon books to be issued soon. And this is very interesting. I think this notification at the bottom, that first of all, there are no more refunds on pop bottles, which is interesting, but also here, notify bank. All evacuees, especially those with checking accounts, are urged to notify their banks of their present address immediately. You can imagine the complications of being interned and being far away from your bank account. So here from Merced, California, free coupons end tomorrow for the month, coupon books for the month of July, and another call for late free coupons if you haven't obtained your July book, to make sure you get them. Free coupon books issued in Turlock. And here are examples of the WCCA issued coupon books. You can see here there are a few remaining, not good if detached, very similar design to the POW coupon books. And here's another quote. Securing everyday necessities was difficult. Most evacuees had brought their own clothing, but a few, either because of poverty or because they had not anticipated the climate, did not own appropriate clothes. In these cases, upon application, the WCCA provided a clothing allowance of between $25 and $42.19 a year, depending on age and sex. And it again says that they had canteens, although often there was nothing to buy. Everything else was ordered from mail order houses. Here's another example of another book with a slightly different color. And you can see on the back that Kei Takemoto has written their name on it a couple of times. Here's another, this is from Tanforan. You can still see it says WCCA Center Stores, and there's one coupon left. And then this I just thought was interesting. They're talking again about the difficulty of the financial situation. Halfway through here it says, meeting their outside obligations such as mortgage payments was impossible unless they already had savings or income producing property, and it was insulting. A WRA librarian received $167 a month, so that's somebody who worked for the administration, while her evacuee staff received $16 a month. Despite the agitation, the system was never changed. And by the time it might have been, the WRA was encouraging evacuees to leave the center. Here again, people, their heavy losses in properties, they had to sell things off quickly. And then it says savings are dipped into for the purchase of coupon books to be used at the center store. And with the depletion of savings comes a mounting sense of insecurity and anxiety as to what will be done when the money is gone. That was from a Red Cross report at the time. And then here, in terms of one question that we had was that we have not seen a lot of examples of these, and if other people have, it would be good sort of if we have time at the end to hear about that. But one possible explanation is this is from another of the newspaper articles where it specifically says to use your coupon books before you go. Coupon books are not reimbursable in cash at the time evacuees are transferred to other relocation centers. And and they're also not going to be negotiable at the next place you go. So they went from these temporary places, the WCCA assembly centers, to the war relocation centers, to be a little bit more put together. Here are a few more examples and some examples of the baggage tags that we talked about before. But in theory, people wanted to use them up, and that would be why they didn't keep them. And in fact, here is the last day of issuance. This is in August 1942 from Pomona. So people are getting baggage instructions. They're being told the workers need to leave tomorrow. They're getting ready to move to the next place. This is also more from Manzanar, which I mentioned was a place that sort of spanned both styles. Here's a mess hall card number and what looks like dog tags. And here actually are ads in, now I don't remember for sure which newspaper, but you can see they're offering things from, here's Wrigley's gum from the canteen. There's a reference to the department store of Block 21, Building 14 to get ladies' cotton hosiery. Also, of course, the Sears Roebuck catalog, which was a classic way to get things. And down here in this column, it says, something special you should notice, the canteen now carries many flavored varieties of Levita soda. And it goes on to talk about gum and evaporated milk and other treats that you can get there. So then they transitioned to the relocation centers, which in theory were supposed to have had a little more time to get ready so that they would be a bit more livable. And another change that happened, which started with, I don't know exactly how it's pronounced, I think Amache, which was in Colorado, was that they started setting up cooperative canteens. So the cooperative movement, they hired somebody who was part of the cooperative movement, a non-Japanese person, to help guide this process. And he said, you know, if you want people to like the setup, have them have more say in it. So they would go in and set up a board of directors, and they would let the Japanese people decide what kinds of things they would stock their shelves with and how to price things and, you know, sort of make the priorities. And here's an example of one of these cooperative canteens that was set up. And these were, again, pretty common around these second type of camps. And then this story is kind of funny. I won't read the entire thing, but basically this is from the interview with Ed Runcorn, who was the person who helped set these up. He said that they were told for the because it was part of a cooperative now, if you're part of the cooperative, if you keep all of your stubs, you'll get some amount of refund because you've invested in the co-op. And so they said, you know, just make sure you keep your stubs. And people didn't really believe in it. So after they would use them, they would just throw them on the floor. Well, so this janitor, who wasn't making very much money on his own, he decided to take it seriously and started picking up all the stubs. So then at the end of the month, he had $3,000 worth of these stubs, even though he was somebody who was only making $16 a month, and was able to get a 10% refund. So he got $300. And then there was an article that was published about it in the newspaper, and suffice it to say, from then on, people saved their stubs. He probably wished they hadn't published the article. This is from a yearbook, and this yearbook, I mean, all the pages are interesting, but just it has all these examples of people talking about the spirit of cooperation and how great it was to build this financial foundation. And you can see that there was morale and this was a good idea. And this just shows how things were managed. So you've got the board of directors, you've got different committees, you've got people in charge of membership and people managing the actual store. Amache also had a silkscreen shop that was used to make all kinds of posters and things, and particularly for the Navy. There was a lot of need for informational posters, and recruitment posters, and so they made over 250,000 at this print shop at Amache. And here's an example of a piece of art about the camp. You can see the sort of foreboding look with the tower. And this at the time was a map of what they knew of the assembly centers and relocation centers across the country. You can see these barracks in different places. So some other examples of co-ops at the time. You can see they've sort of different stands set up with different specific things you can buy. And then, you know, the barbershop was part of it. The dry cleaners was part of it. And then lots and lots of examples again from the newspapers. Here's co-op script sale. Script for co-op purchases will be on sale at number 1608 during the following hours each day. And only government paychecks or cash will be accepted in payment of script. And here they have the regulations for how to use the script. where it can be used, what it can be used for, and about refunds. This is from Newell, California. Script book purchases declared not taxable in a legal opinion from the Solicitor of the War Relocation Authority, which is interesting. It also has job opportunities for people. Special shoe stamps, good for 30 days. Residents not to bring script covers with their stubs. Patrons warned not to lose or discard used coupon books. And here are the sales at the cooperative. This is in Rower. The sales to date, and you can see they're very open about what's happening, but also there's a lot happening with the canteen. City co-op store to honor WRA basic clothing scripts, so they're working together there. This is in Topaz, Utah. And then I'm conscious of time, Dad. I do need to hand it over to you at some point. Minidoka. So this is people arriving in Minidoka. This is in Idaho. Even though these were supposed to be the sort of better set up sites, they found that they had very, very little space and very little privacy. So they had this large room and they hung up blankets to sort of make divisions so each family could have a little bit of privacy. You can see all of the barracks. The temperature here was, in the desert, and so they had these extreme temperatures from 21 degrees in the winter at night up to 104 degrees in the summer in the heat. It was very uncomfortable for a lot of people. This is a map. It says our home for the duration, and on this map, again, probably hard to see, but the canteen is listed here. Oops. Can you guys actually, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but anyway, the canteen is listed, and the newspaper office and warehouse and administrative area. So here are the staff of the post office. They did also sell bonds, although the Japanese were not allowed to be the people selling the bonds, so they could buy the bonds. Here's an aliens indefinite leave identification for Minidoka. This is a letter from someone working in the beet fields and talking about the challenges of living here and asking why the government is cooping them up. Here's a letter that came from Dubuque, Iowa, being sent to a couple in Minidoka. Here's a school. Now, all of these places, people set up their lives. They were there for a long time. They were there with families, and they needed to figure out how to move forward. So they had high schools, they had elementary schools, they had hospitals. They had a library, warehouses, choirs, bands, orchestras, sports teams, newspaper, like I said. And actually Minidoka had 2 elementary schools and over 1,000 students enrolled in the high school. Here, in fact, is their high school yearbook. This is the staff of the ration office. This is an article about the payroll, the bylaws for the co-op. And this is like a scarf or a dish or a tea towel for the co-op. Here's the co-op staff. You can see here are some of the different, there's a barber shop to the right, there's a watch and jewelry repair, dry cleaning and laundry services. These were all part of the co-op at Minidoka. And this, just for fun, is a big band performance. Now this is something that we have seen, a movie ticket from Minidoka. They, among the sort of fun activities that we had, although we have not seen specific co-op coupon books, although there are all of these references to them. This one's mine. And this is at the site, the honor roll. There were over 1,000 internees who enlisted in the military, including the legendary 100th 442nd Regiment combat team, the most decorated of its size in World War II. or in U.S. military history, and they had 73 people who were killed, and their families were not permitted to go to their funerals because they were still interned. All right, Dad.
You'll be moving the slides then.
That's fine. You tell me when.
Okay. So thank you, Ray. That was pretty amazing, guys. I mean, the level of detail that Ray has uncovered is unbelievable, including many examples of the money. I found a few, Rachel found most. Okay. This is the Immigration Naturalization Service Detention Center. Some of these are pretty well known. They're different than the camps that Ray described, still for Japanese, either Japanese Americans or Japanese citizens. Here we go, Ray, next. So these camps held a total of about 32,000 people, of which about 17,000 were Japanese. Of course, you might wonder who else was there. Germans, German Americans, Italians, Italian Americans. And these were mainly in Texas, with one in Santa Fe. Okay. Crystal City turns out to be the family camp and the largest of all the camps. Here we go, Ray. Lordsburg, New Mexico, I believe, was a camp. Go ahead. Just a mapping of the camp itself. Go ahead. A beer card, so a form of money. Very similar to other camp, monies where you punch out one of the numbers if you got a beer. So this looks like it's good for about 30, a month worth of beer, maybe one a day. But in fact, it is the month of April. Go ahead, Ray. Here is a money booklet, a chit booklet from Lordsburg, New Mexico. Same guy as the beer coupon. Go ahead, Ray, because we're going to move along. Sayegoville was in Texas and was the site of a former prison for women. And as such, that led to an interesting situation in that Amy Stannard, who had been the, I guess you call it the superintendent of the women's prison, became the woman in charge of the civilian internment camp at Sayegoville, the only woman to head a camp. And there was an extensive interview that was taken of her just a few weeks before she died, a project from a university. And she was born in 1894, and she was a psychiatrist. She was appointed to the Border Patrol in the U.S. Department of Justice and ended up at the Federal Reformatory for Women at Sayegoville. Then she became the head of the INS camp, and after World War II, she went back to California in 1946, where she lived in Palo Alto, and she went on to 1978 when she died. Okay. Go ahead, Ray. There's more of the interview, but we're going to move forward. These are things confiscated at Sayegoville by a raid that, this is an all-night raid that occurred at Sayegoville, and lots of contraband, as I'm sure at many other camps there was contraband as well, or prisons for that matter. Go ahead, Ray. This is the main entrance to Sayegoville, Texas, which is, by the way, a prison again. So this is the so-called college-like campus of the Sayegoville internment camp. It was described as a pleasant college campus-like atmosphere. Go ahead. And people could live in these huts. There were huts for Japanese, huts for Germans, huts for Italians. All right, Ray. These are the sports teams there, and also band groups, just for a pose in front of one of the main buildings at Sayegoville. Again, Sayegoville, the main building. Looks like a repeat. I think we're in a loop here. All right, there we go. This is the some of the pressed paper or plastic, also tokens issued at Sayegoville. A very plain design, and as you'll see, very similar to the tokens issued by the INS at other camps, including Ellis Island in New York, by the way, and also at Crystal City, Texas. This hexagonal design, sometimes circular, in this kind of very lightweight plastic or paper. Okay, Ray. And the
Technically, it's
denomination.
an octagon, Dan.
Oh, octagon. Sorry, you're right. I should know that.
Yeah, you know a little bit about math.
Go ahead, Ray. So a dollar, a quarter, and a nickel. Keep going, Ray. All right.
Do you want to say what they were made out of?
I did already. I said
Oh.
pressed paper or plastic.
Sorry, I missed that. Sorry.
So Crystal City is in very remote southwest Texas, not far from the Mexican border. Now a little story about a trip there. This is not in Crystal City. Those in the know recognize that beautiful Capitol building as the capital of the state of Texas in Austin. So we flew into Austin, Ray and I. We know the date. We know the month. I'll just give you the month and the year, March 2014.
February.
What do we know that? February. At the end of February of 2014, because on March 9th, Rachel gave birth to Leah, the one you just heard from when she was talking. Rachel was rather, how should we describe it, pleasantly plump, as was her dad. Okay. There is Larry Shmutensky, our host and driver and all-around good guy. And his wife came with us as well, Purdy. And that is a historian of the state of Texas. And his name I've already forgotten, but I know Ray knows.
Bill McWhorter.
So we met him. I was a little late because the plane was late, but I got to the meeting, and he was, among other things, preserving these camps and signing the camps. With also, you'll see some of the signs in a second. Very nice guy, very knowledgeable about the camps. Here we go, Ray. So there he is with a great book on the left, and he's holding some, I gave him as a gift a matchbook from Kennedy Internment Camp. He was excited about that. And the book was a gift too, because he spent a few hours with us and was a very knowledgeable guy. All right. These are the city limits of Crystal City. It took a while to get there, even from Austin, Texas. As I said, in the middle of nowhere. But it is famous for one product, even to this day. And that product is spinach. And there is the famous statue of Popeye the Sailor Man, who loved spinach. And matching Popeye is the pregnant Ray. She's pretty strong, too.
Very strong.
Go ahead, Ray.
Just to mention, if people don't know the book, The Train to Crystal City, which is a great description of Crystal City, they talk about when they arrived in Crystal City, seeing this very statue and sort of wondering where it was that they were going to be living.
Okay. Keep going, Ray. So this is at the beginning of the campsite, just a description done by the Texas Historical Society. Giving things like the number of people there, life there. As I said, this was the family camp. I'm not going to draw on this slide. Go ahead. There's an aerial view when the camp was in operation. As I said, a pretty large operation, over 3,000 residents. Note on the left, that circular building, that's the camp swimming pool. We'll come back to that in a minute, as is described on this slide. So Japanese and federal schools, German schools. So this housed primarily Japanese and German internees. These tended not to be American citizens, but Japanese and German citizens, as well as citizens of these two countries that had been, or people who had been born in South American countries, were shipped up here by mutual agreement with the United States. Okay, next. From the time of the war, an image of the campsite. And there's the pool upper left. Go ahead.
I also like that they have the buzzard, the giant grasshopper, the cockroach, and the blister bug listed here.
It wasn't the most pleasant of sights. And hot, by the way, very hot. Go ahead. These are contemporary scenes, rare color photographs of Crystal City. So you can see the barracks, water tower. They also had a gigantic water tank, which we'll show you in a second, and a little pleasant bridge, guard towers at Crystal City. Go ahead, Ray. All right, we slowed down now. Now, what's there today? It's in ruins, but you can still see the outlines of buildings, and the swimming pool turns out to be a highlight. So, the entire land is owned by the school district of the city of Crystal City. And in fact, their public schools are on the property. But some of the original campsite can still be seen. This is the outline of a residence at the camp. Go ahead, Ray. And there's Larry and his wife, Purdy. And lo and behold, they describe the money. Okay. It says on the bottom, camp script, courtesy of the National Border Museum in El Paso. So it's not on site, but there it is. I'll show you better pictures in a second. This is describing the internment process and the repatriation at the end. That turned out to have some tragic aspects because there were kids born in the United States, say to German parents, or German citizens, who were taken back to Germany after World War II, a place you didn't want to be. Germany had been essentially destroyed. People were starving. And here you have American citizens being forced to go back. They were kids, of course, of German citizens. Go ahead, Ray.
Do you want to explain that was for Crystal City, that theoretically was the goal for everybody who was there, that they had agreed? Do you want to talk about that, or do you want me to?
I think we should move on. But yes, okay. I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, so because we were talking about the different types of camps, this is a difference. First of all, the people in these camps didn't necessarily do anything, but they were people who had theoretically aroused suspicion. They had a neighbor who said, oh, I don't know, they have a lot of meetings at night, or, ooh, I heard them using a radio, I wonder who they're talking to, or, oh, they get a lot of packages from Japan. And so there wasn't a fair trial procedure or anything like that. There didn't have to be. But the people who ended out in Crystal City specifically and went through this system, as opposed to the war relocation side of things, they made a deal basically where they said, well, I've been in prison in a worse place. I'd like to go to the Crystal City family camp and have my family come with me. And in exchange for us being able to be together, we'll agree that we're willing to go back and that you can exchange us for American citizens who you want to bring with you. So, but as my dad said, there were children who were US citizens who didn't want to have to go back, who didn't grow up even speaking Japanese necessarily, but were sort of put into this awkward position.
Okay. So it is now 1:46, 14 minutes to go,
Okay.
Although Joe owes us a few minutes from the end of his presentation. All right, this was a censored letter with the official Attorney of War envelope. These can be found on eBay fairly frequently today. Okay, so this is coming from Crystal City, and of course mail went into Crystal City as well. Go ahead, Ray. There you go. This is a letter coming from Ecuador, coming into Crystal City. Go ahead, Ray. And this is an interesting one from the German spokesperson, Willy Bach. What's interesting about it is, that it's from the head German guy, but also that it's dated May 11th, 1945, 2 days after VE Day, and it's going to the International Committee of the Red Cross. One wonders, what it's about. Perhaps it was because the war in Europe had come to an end. Maybe they want to know how they're going to get back. Go ahead, Ray. Close-up of the name and the postmark. Another letter, this one in Japanese, also censored. Go ahead, Ray.
And interesting that it's got the different languages because of the different people living in the camp.
Now for a little bit about the swimming pool. So this was a community pool for both communities, the Japanese and the German communities, but they swam in different areas. They had their own bathhouses. There was the Japanese bathhouse. There was the German bathhouse. And in the bank is a gigantic water tank. That turns out to be relevant in a second. Okay, Ray. Today, that is the swimming pool. Overgrown, but clearly outlined. It's quite moving to kind of see it in this fashion. You know, history as it is today, 70 years later. Go ahead, Ray. And there's that water tank. They had a conference there. And Justice for All, the first National Historic Reunion swimming pool, World War II internment camp. This was held in 2002. It was an internment camp, 1942 to 47. So they didn't get out that fast. United we stand. Go ahead, Ray. Thank you. And the team. Proud to be with that person. The other somewhat weighty. Although I've lost 20 pounds with this, our current internment, by the way. Yes, we're interned. Many of us are interned now in our own homes. This is a school on site. Yeah, right. And then we have money from Crystal City. Clothing tokens. These are fairly scarce. 1 cent clothing token. I don't know why they made separate ones for clothing, by the way. As far as I know, it's the only camp that had its own clothing tokens. They had regular tokens as well, maybe to control the amount of clothing and its sale. Okay, you can see the quote. Go back for a second. We had no problems with clothing. We were issued special tokens to purchase clothing. For other items or to pay for service-related expenses, separate types of tokens were issued. So you can even buy a watermelon, which I imagine on those hot summer days would be useful. Go ahead, Ray. And this is a set of the Crystal City tokens. The green 5 is a rarity. Heritage Auction sold one just a few years back. So we have a good image of it, I think, in the next slide. There it is, the $5 green plastic token. Go ahead, Ray. And there it is. Official, just back to take a quick look. Alien Detention Station, Crystal City, Texas. We're down to the 10-minute warning. Go ahead, Ray. Okay. So these were not POWs. There was a separate Geneva Convention of 1929 for the POW story, which we're not going to give now. You can get Dave Celia and Dave Frank's new book on POWs and learn about the Geneva Convention for that. In accordance to the third Geneva Convention, no internee had to perform manual labor against their will. For those who wanted to work, they could earn 10 cents per hour, up to a maximum of $4 per week. And the jobs are listed: store clerks, hospital staff, librarians, laundry workers, and so on. The POWs, by the way, also earn 10 cents per hour. And at the end, although camp script was issued to the internees, when you left the camp, you could get a U.S. government check in dollars, also for the POWs. Go ahead. Aha, thank you, Ray, for indicating the reference to the Dave and Dave book. Next slide, Ray. So this is, there's some quotes about the use of the money in Crystal City. And every week they got tokens, and our second paragraph, our family never suffered from any lack of food, adequate meat and fish. We could even afford the luxury of having sashimi with our beer ration. That actually sounds pretty good, I must say. In the beginning, we issued long grain rice, which we were not accustomed to, but later, someone knowledgeable about rice negotiated to have California rice and Arkansas rice brought in, and soon we had a more familiar Japanese-style rice. I've had the difference. It's quite noticeable, by the way. We prepared it on government-provided ranges, and as we were accustomed, had it with every meal. Okay. Proportionate to available products, however, currency seems to be insufficient. So within the camp, trading of products flourished. In other words, the famous black market. Some, I heard, even initiated international trade practices by taking government-issued butter, which the Japanese did not use much, to the area reserved for German internees to exchange for fish, which they in turn did not particularly like. Now you have to admire that. Trade. I like how they called it international trade. Go ahead, Ray. So we left Crystal City and drove back to San Antonio, and of course had to visit the Great Alamo, which is this little church in San Antonio, near, not far from the Riverwalk. So there's the team that went to Crystal City, and the Alamo is worth a visit. It's pretty stark inside. There isn't that much to see, but just being on the grounds of the Great Alamo, I mean, it's worth seeing. Go ahead, Ray. So the story doesn't quite end yet. It's 1:53. My story doesn't end, or Ray's story with me. But the Japanese knew that they had been mistreated. I'm talking about the Japanese Americans, which constituted 70% of the deportees from the West Coast. And finally, under President Reagan, the right thing was done, and they were issued a form of reimbursement for their loss of freedom. After all, these were American citizens again. I know it's a touchy subject. I'm not going to get into all the politics of it, but Ronald Reagan did the right thing, in my opinion, signed an act of Congress which provided each repatriated Japanese American with a government check for $20,000. It was actually given under the reign of George Bush, the senior, and there is an example of a $20,000 check. And we have a quote from President Bush on behalf of the nation. Whoops, that seems to have evaporated.
You might, but I don't have it.
Yeah. Anyway, George Bush, the president, sent a letter to each of an official apology on behalf of the U.S. government. And that was done, I believe, 1989. Okay.
88.
No, it had to be 89.
Oh, yeah, 89. You're right.
No, but you're right. The actual law was signed by President Reagan in 88. It was just given, 89. Okay, we have 5 or 6 minutes. I think the timing is pretty good. I probably raced maybe a little fast, but I wanted to get to this point. So thank you for listening. Ray did, let's say, 77% of the work or more, 82% or something like that. So I give her full credit. She's really good at this. All right. Does anybody have a question? You can do that 2 ways. You can just ask by unmuting yourself, or you can send a chat message. I see one chat is there. Is there anything? That's Ray giving the reference to our to the new book on POW. Does anybody have a question?
Yeah, Ray?
Yeah. Hi, Neil.
Hi. I've
Hi.
been listening to most of it. There was no ticket, no paper, anything, just token.
No, there were tickets.
There were
Ray,
tickets?
yes, Ray can describe it.
Yeah, in the.
Well, I mean, the movie ticket, yeah, I saw that. But as far as like our POW camps, there were
Yes.
no tickets like that at all.
There were coupon books with chits like in the POW camps.
Did I
Just
miss
like-
that? I had to be waiting for it.
Yes, we
Yeah,
have images of them, Neil, in the beginning of the talk.
I can.
There were chit books, and we have found examples of maybe 10 chits so far.
Okay.
So Ray is
So-
racing to show you a couple. In the meantime, somebody else can ask a question.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
here. So here,
Ray?
Neil. There's an
I-
example, Neil.
Oh, look
I don't know if anybody can hear me.
Yeah. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Ray. Hi,
Hey,
Steve,
Bill.
and Neil, all my friends. I know there was a camp in Colorado, Granada, I think. Were there any money from there or any chits? or
Yeah.
anything?
So that actually is the Apache camp that we talked about.
Okay.
That was the nickname.
That's the
Or
Amache.
Amache, I'm sorry, Amache with an M. That was the nickname of it. And so they definitely had something. It's talked about in their newspaper. They had a co-op, and they talk about the stubs and they talk about the coupons, but I haven't seen any.
Okay. Well, thanks.
So if you
I
can
really
find
enjoyed
any,
it.
if you can find any, that would be.
We're ready to buy one.
Me too.
Next question. We have 3 minutes.
Like
4,
something
I
in
would say technically, but
Hello. Can
hello,
you,
somebody.
Hello. Yes.
can you show that U.S. Treasury check again, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. To answer the question that came up in the chat, I don't know who printed them.
Which ones? The Chicherman?
Yeah.
Okay.
Although it's a good. I
No.
feel like I looked at it briefly, but don't remember right now. And also to answer more specifically for Neil, Crystal City, we don't know of coupon books.
Right. They had their
but
own.
we know of them from the WCCA assembly centers and from
Okay.
the
Here's
WRA.
here's the check. Was there a question with that?
No.
Okay. I think we have time for one last question.
I got another question. Hi, Steve. Hi, Ray.
Hi.
What material were the tokens made from, and how scarce are they today to collect them?
So the tokens are made out of plastic or pressed paper.
Like a very firm cardboard feeling.
Cardboard.
Correct.
Very, but harder than regular cardboard, pressed
Okay.
together.
And the depends on denomination. You know, those say the 1 cent basic plastic token, the INS type token, those go for maybe $50 to $75. Whereas the $5 token from Crystal City, that's probably a $1,000 item.
Okay.
Ish. That's what Dave Frank there. Dave, do you have a $5 token?
No.
Or maybe he's not here now. Okay.
So he's muted. I see him.
Oh.
Steve? Yeah, I have a $5 token.
my
Steve?
estimate is reasonable.
No.
Well, the 1 cent token, $50 to $75?
Yeah, probably.
All right, that one's close. So you're telling me the other one might be more expensive?
Well, the Crystal City red and green tokens are all very rare. They're all going to be $400 or $500 and up.
Okay,
The
so
gray or brownish tokens, they're more common, and they might range anywhere from $50 to a couple of $100.
I wasn't far off then, I would say. Although maybe the $5 token is several $1,000s.
I have a lot of those, the gray or brown ones. So if anybody wants one, contact me.
Maybe
you should just set up a camp.
Yeah. Anybody else? So actually, it just struck 2 o'clock Central Time. So I think, and thank you, Roger, for your nice comment. I think we'll end the talk right on the stroke. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dad.
Very.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Roger.
it.